Have you ever noticed how some people lose themselves completely when they fall in love? They don't gradually disappear. They don't slowly fade away. They simply dissolve, as if their entire identity was waiting for permission to vanish. And suddenly, the person you once knew, with their dreams, their edges, their fire, becomes a shadow of someone else's expectations. Now imagine if you recognize this pattern in yourself before it was too late. When you love without boundaries, you are not loving, you are merging, you are abandoning the fortress of your own soul to live in the chaos of another person's inner world. Carl Jung said, "The meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances. If there is any reaction, both are transformed." Notice he said both are transformed, not that one dissolves while the other remains whole. But that's exactly what happens when you love without limits. You don't transform, you disappear. And the cruelest part? You call it love. But Jung would call it psychological enmeshment, the slow, sweet suicide of the self. So I ask you now, how much of yourself have you already sacrificed at the altar of someone else's approval? Maybe it's time to understand why loving without boundaries doesn't make you noble. It makes you disappear. You are taught that love means sacrifice, that if you truly care, you should bend, accommodate, soften every sharp edge until you fit perfectly into their life. Your parents probably modeled this. Your favorite movies glorified it. The lover who gives up everything. That's the hero, right? But here's a truth no one tells you. Boundless love is not a virtue. It is a pathology. When you have no boundaries in love, you have no self. You become a psychological chameleon, constantly shape-shifting to match your partner's needs, moods, and expectations. Jung spoke about participation mystique, where two people become so psychologically fused that neither can tell where one ends and the other begins. In healthy doses, this is the magic of early love. But when it becomes permanent, when you can't have a feeling without checking if it's acceptable to them, that's not intimacy. That's imprisonment. Your psyche fragments. The parts of you that don't align with your partner's vision get pushed into what Jung called the shadow. You love horror movies, but they think it's childish, so you stop. You're naturally introverted, but they need constant social stimulation, so you perform. You have ambitions, but they feel threatened, so you make yourself smaller, dimmer, less. And it's gradual. You justify each small surrender. It's just a movie. It's just one party. It's just this one dream. But each small yes to them is a small no to yourself, and over time, you become a stranger to your own soul. The worst part? Your partner might not even demand this. You're doing it preemptively, unconsciously, because you're terrified that if you're too different, too independent, too whole on your own, they might leave. So you make yourself needed. You manage their emotions, anticipate their needs, regulate their moods. You consume your own identity to feed the relationship, and you call this love. But the human psyche isn't designed for this level of self-betrayal. You become resentful without knowing why, exhausted without pinpointing the source. You look in the mirror and see a stranger, someone who smiles when dying inside. Jung understood this. You cannot truly love another person if you have abandoned yourself, because what you're offering isn't love. It's a desperate transaction. I will erase myself if you promise not to leave me. And deep down, your partner feels this weight. They feel responsible for your entire sense of worth. And ironically, this pushes them away. Because nobody respects what costs them nothing. Nobody values what is always endlessly, exhaustingly available. Now stop and think. When was the last time you said no without guilt? When was the last time you allowed yourself to be misunderstood rather than twisting yourself into explanations? If you can't remember, we need to go deeper. Because the mechanism of self-erasure isn't just about behavior. It's about your entire concept of what it means to be a separate person. Carl Jung called it The process of individuation, the lifelong journey of becoming who you truly are. But when you enter a romantic relationship without having done this work, something catastrophic happens. You don't bring two whole people together. You bring two halves searching for completion in each other. This is what destroys you. You're not loving a person. You're loving the idea that they can complete you. Jung called this projection. You project onto your partner all the qualities you haven't developed in yourself. She's confident, you're anxious. He's rational, you're emotional. They're social, you're withdrawn. In the beginning, this feels like magic, but here's the truth. You haven't found your other half. You've found a mirror for everything you've refused to integrate in yourself. The relationship becomes a prison where both people try to live through each other rather than alongside each other. You need them to be strong so you don't have to develop strength. They need you to be emotional so they don't have to feel. It's parasitic, disguised as romance. Jung said, when an inner situation is not made conscious, it happens outside as fate. If you haven't become whole, your relationships will force you to. They will reflect back every unintegrated part of yourself until you're drowning in your own unresolved psychology. This is why boundless love feels so consuming, so dramatic. It's not passion, it's two incomplete psyches desperately trying to merge into one functional person. And when your partner fails to be what you need, when they show their own weakness, their own separateness, you feel betrayed. Not because they did anything wrong, but because they stopped being your projection screen. Without boundaries, every emotion they have becomes your responsibility. They're sad. You must fix it. They're angry. You caused it. They're distant. You must win them back. You become enslaved to another person's emotional weather, constantly adjusting to keep the climate stable. Jung warned about psychological inflation, where one person becomes inflated with responsibility for the other's entire emotional world, and the other deflates into helpless dependency. Neither is healthy. Both lead to dissolution of the self. The tragic irony: the more you sacrifice yourself, the less attractive you become. Your partner loses respect for you, not because you're loving too much, but because you've stopped being a person. You've become a function, a service, and in your unconscious, where truth lives even when you refuse to acknowledge it, you know this. You feel it in the resentment that builds, in the quiet rage over small things, the dishes, the forgotten errand. These aren't about the dishes. They're about 1,000 small self-betrayals. Jung said, there is no coming to consciousness without pain. This is your pain, recognizing you've been complicit in your own disappearance. Nobody forced you. You did it willingly, thinking it was love, thinking it was what good partners do. But it wasn't. It was fear. Fear of being alone. Fear of being too much. Fear of being not enough. Fear of discovering that without someone else to define you, you might not know who you are at all. And here's something most people never consider. Your boundlessness doesn't just harm you, it actually damages your partner too. When you have no boundaries, you force them into a position of power they never asked for. You make them responsible for your happiness, your identity, your entire emotional ecosystem. And that's an impossible burden. Think about it. When someone has no limits, no edges, no clear sense of self, they become unpredictable in the worst way. Not the exciting unpredictability of spontaneity, but the exhausting unpredictability of someone who changes based on whatever you need them to be. Your partner can never relax because they're never sure which version of you will show up. The agreeable one, the resentful one, the martyr. This creates what psychologists call walking on eggshells syndrome, but from the opposite direction. They're not afraid of your anger. They're afraid of your agreeableness. Because every yes you give might be hiding a no. Every smile might be masking resentment. Every "I'm fine" might be storing ammunition for a future explosion. Jung understood this dynamic deeply. He said, The meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances. If there is any reaction, both are transformed. But notice, a reaction requires two distinct substances. If one substance has no integrity, no structure, no defined properties, there can be no genuine reaction. There can only be absorption. One dissolving into the other. Your partner, whether they realize it consciously or not, begins to distrust your love. Not because they doubt your feelings, but because they sense that your love isn't coming from a place of choice. It's coming from a place of desperation, and desperate love, no matter how intense, never feels secure. It feels like obligation, like debt, like a trap. So when you finally start setting boundaries, yes, there will be resistance, but underneath that resistance, there might also be relief. Relief that you're finally becoming someone they can actually relate to as an equal. Someone who can say no, which makes your yes actually mean something. Someone who has preferences, which means choosing them is a real choice, not a default. So now the uncomfortable question, are you ready to become whole even if it costs you the relationship? Are you ready to draw boundaries even if it means conflict? Because when you start reclaiming yourself, your partner will react, and how they react will tell you everything. The path to psychological sovereignty in love doesn't start with your partner. It starts with you. And you've been lying to yourself, telling yourself that love means endless flexibility, that boundaries are selfish, that your needs matter less than relationship stability. Real transformation begins with conscious unavailability, not the cruel kind that manipulates, but the sacred kind that says, I am not accessible to violations of myself, even in the name of love. This means learning to hear the voice inside that knows when something is wrong, even when your partner says everything is fine. It means trusting your own emotional truth, even when it contradicts their version of reality. It means developing what Jung called the transcendent function, the ability to hold two opposing truths. I love this person, and I need to protect myself. Start small, pick one pattern and break it. Maybe it's that weekly obligation you dread. Maybe it's how you edit your opinions. Maybe it's always apologizing first when you're not wrong. Just stop doing it and watch. Watch what happens in your partner. Watch what happens in yourself. This is Jung's active imagination, observing the psychological reality that emerges when you actually change. Your partner might get confused. Why are you being weird? They might get angry. You're not the person I fell in love with. They might manipulate. If you really loved me, let them feel whatever they feel. Your job isn't to manage their emotions. It never was. Your job is to stay grounded in your own center, to develop what Jung called the observing ego, that part that can witness your psychological processes without getting swept away. When they're upset, you can feel compassion without making it your responsibility. This is incredibly difficult. You've been conditioned to be a psychological ping-pong ball bouncing between your partner's moods. So when you stop, it will feel like you're being cruel. You'll feel crushing guilt, but that guilt, that's not your conscience. That's your conditioning. Jung would tell you to examine it. Ask, whose voice is this? What part of me is afraid of being a separate person? Often, the answer goes back to childhood, to the ways you learned that love is conditional on self-erasure. Maybe your parents only approved when you were good, quiet, compliant, easy. Maybe affection was withdrawn when you were too much yourself. This is shadow work, meeting the parts of yourself you exiled to win love. The angry part, the selfish part, the part that wants things for itself. These aren't flaws. They're essential aspects of a whole human being. Until you reclaim them, you will continue abandoning yourself in every relationship. Jung said, I'd rather be whole than good. Wholeness includes your difficult edges, your inconvenient needs, your refusal to be what others want. You've been trying to be good. it's destroying you. The transformation requires that you become willing to be misunderstood. When you start setting boundaries, people will create stories. You're being influenced. You're going through a phase. You're being selfish. Let them. The people who truly love you will adjust. The others, they're telling you they never loved you. They loved their access to you. Jung understood real love can only exist between two whole people, not two halves trying to complete each other, two sovereign individuals who choose each other from fullness, not neediness. This means you need to be capable of being alone, not just physically, but psychologically. You need to know you can survive without them, that your identity doesn't collapse if they leave. This is terrifying if you've been using relationships to avoid yourself. But it's also liberating. When you know you can be alone, you stop making decisions from fear. You stop tolerating disrespect. You stop performing. You start showing up as you are. Complex, contradictory, fully human. Yes, this might mean the relationship ends. When you stop being boundless, some relationships can't survive. They were built on your self-abandonment. But if a relationship can only survive when you're diminished, is it really worth having? Or is it just a comfortable prison? The transformation isn't about becoming cold. It's about becoming individuated, becoming fully yourself and fully capable of genuine connection. You can't have real intimacy without boundaries. You can only have enmeshment, which feels like intimacy but is actually mutual imprisonment. And here's what nobody tells you about this journey. Setting boundaries will reveal who actually loves you versus who just loved what you did for them. It's a brutal filter, but it's also the most honest assessment you'll ever get of your relationships. Watch what happens when you say no for the first time. Watch who respects it immediately and who launches into manipulation tactics. Watch who asks questions to understand your boundary and who treats it like a personal attack. Watch who adjusts their behavior and who doubles down on violating your space. These responses aren't random, they're revelations. Jung called this the shadow revealing itself. When you hold up a boundary like a mirror, people show you their true nature. The ones who respect your boundaries respect you as a separate person. The ones who fight your boundaries see you as an extension of themselves, a tool, not a person. And this is where it gets really interesting from a psychological perspective. Often, the people who react most strongly to your boundaries are the ones who have the poorest boundaries themselves. They're not upset because you've changed. They're upset because your clarity exposes their chaos. Your definition exposes their diffuseness. Your wholeness exposes their fragmentation. It's like you've been playing a game of psychological hide-and-seek, and suddenly you've turned on the lights. Everyone can see now, and some people preferred the darkness because in the darkness, they could pretend, they could project, they could make you into whatever they needed you to be. But you're not doing that anymore. You're standing in full light saying, this is who I am. This is where I end. This is what I will and will not accept. And that level of psychological honesty is rare. It's powerful. And it's deeply threatening to anyone who's built their entire relational strategy on other people's lack of boundaries. When you finally draw the first real boundary in a boundless relationship, something shifts. Not immediately, but underneath, at the level of your psyche, a tectonic plate moves. You've just told yourself, perhaps for the first time in years, I matter. Your partner doesn't know what to do with this new version of you. They test the boundary. They push to see if it's real or if you'll collapse back. This is normal. Every system resists change, especially relationship systems built on your self-sacrifice. Hold the line. Not with aggression, but with quiet, immovable presence. This is where I end and you begin. This is what I will accept. This is what I will not. And then the relationship either transforms or dies. Either your partner rises to meet you as an equal, a whole person relating to another whole person, or they reveal they were never interested in you, only in what you provided. If they rise, if they do their own shadow work, develop their own boundaries, then you become a conscious couple, two individuals who have chosen each other from strength, not need. The love that emerges is cleaner, calmer, more spacious. There's room to breathe, room to be yourself. But if they don't, if they rage against your boundaries, punish you, make you feel like the problem, then you're facing the hardest truth. You've been in love with a fantasy, with who you hoped they'd become if you just sacrificed enough. Jung warned about this. He knew that not every combination can react. Some are inert, some are toxic, and no amount of wishful thinking changes the chemistry. The rebirth isn't always about the relationship continuing. Sometimes it's about finally choosing yourself after years of choosing everyone else. It's about walking away from love that requires your death. This is the loneliness that comes before wholeness. Not desperate loneliness, but sacred loneliness. You're alone with yourself for the first time in years. No partner to manage, no emotions to regulate, no role to perform, just you. And at first, it's terrifying. You don't know who you are without them. Then you remember, I'm learning to be my own reference point now. I'm learning that I was never incomplete. This is Jung's union of opposites happening within yourself. The parts that were exiled and the parts that were overemphasized. They integrate. You become whole. Not perfect, but whole. A complete human being. And from this wholeness, you can finally love properly. Not desperate, consuming love, but mature, boundaried love of one whole person for another. You can give freely because you're not giving yourself away. You can stay because you want to, not because you're afraid to leave. The people you attract change. You stop drawing in those who want to consume you. You start noticing ones who've also done their work, who also understand that real love requires two people who can stand alone together. Jung spent his life studying this transformation. He called it the path to self, capital S. Not the small self of ego, but the self that includes everything you are, conscious and unconscious, light and shadow. This self can only emerge when you stop abandoning yourself. You'll lose people on this path. Family members uncomfortable with your boundaries. Friends who preferred the version that never said no. Partners who needed you broken. Let them go. Not with anger, but with understanding that everyone is on their own journey. What you gain is yourself, your energy, your peace, your sovereignty. Your life lived from the inside out. You wake up without anxiety about your partner's mood. You make decisions based on your own values. You create, build, pursue goals without checking if it's okay. This is the rebirth Jung promised. Not easy, not painless, but utterly essential. Because a life without boundaries isn't a life at all. It's a slow dissolution dressed up as devotion. You were never meant to disappear. You were meant to individuate, to become fully yourself, to know that you are enough, complete, whole, worthy, regardless of whether anyone chooses to love you. So I ask you one final time, are you ready to be whole even if it costs you everything familiar? Are you ready to discover who you are when you stop being who others need you to be? Because on the other side of that question is your life, your real life. Jung said it best. The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are, not who your partner wants, not who your family expects. You, whole, bounded, free. Today, we learned from Carl Jung that love without boundaries doesn't expand you, it erases you. Real love requires two whole people, not two halves trying to merge. If these insights sparked something in you, hit the like button to help others discover this message. Subscribe to join our community exploring transformative ideas every week. Ideas that change how we see ourselves and our relationships. In the comments, tell me, what boundary do you need to set today to reclaim yourself? Let's build a space where honest self-reflection is honored. Until we meet again, remember, you are never meant to disappear in love. You are meant to discover yourself through it. Carry that truth forward. May you find our talks not only educational, but also inspirational and hopefully, ultimately, transformational. See you next time.